They said he was lucky to be alive. Marcus Hale didn't feel lucky. He sat alone in interview room B, hands folded neatly on the metal table, posture calm to calm for a man accused of murder. The camera blinked red above him, recording every breath, every blink. Outside the room, detectives whispered the same question over and over again. Why didn't he run? The fire had swallowed the warehouse in under 10 minutes. Flames tore through decades of dust, rust, and secrets. When firefighters finally broke through the smoke, they found one body inside Victor Kane. Real estate mogul, political donor, the kind of man who owned half the city without ever appearing on a ballot. And sitting on the curb outside, untouched by soot or panic, was Marcus Hale. Marcus had waited. That alone made him suspicious. To the city, Victor Kane was a savior. He funded hospitals, sponsored youth programs, smiled beside mayors and pastors. To Marcus, Victor Kane was the man who had quietly destroyed his life. 10 years earlier, Marcus was a night shift accountant, quiet, invisible. He noticed patterns others didn't, numbers that didn't add up, shell companies layered like smoke. When Marcus flagged irregularities tied to Kane Industries, he thought he was doing his job. Victor Kane thought otherwise. Within weeks, Marcus was fired, then blacklisted. His professional licenses were challenged. His savings evaporated under legal fees he never understood. The city believed Kane's version, a disgruntled employee trying to extort a good man. Marcus learned something important that year. Power doesn't have to shout. It just has to lean. By the time the warehouse burned, Marcus was a rideshare driver, scraping by, living in a one-room apartment with a cracked window that never quite closed. He'd learned how to survive on less. He'd learned how to be underestimated, and he'd learned how to watch the night of the fire. Victor Kane had summoned him unexpectedly, a private meeting, a threat disguised as generosity. Kane wanted Marcus to sign a non-disclosure agreement, retroactive, airtight. In exchange, Kane would help him get back on his feet. Marcus recognized the trap. He also recognized the opportunity. The warehouse was supposed to be empty. That's what Kane said. Just paperwork. Old records. Nothing important. But Marcus noticed the security detail was thinner than usual. Cameras disabled. Fire alarms offline for maintenance. Too convenient. Inside, the air smelled like oil and dust. Kane talked. He always talked. About legacy. About men who failed because they didn't understand the game. About Marcus. Specifically how close he'd come to being something, and how easily he'd been erased. Then the lights went out. The fire started fast, accelerant, professional. Kane panicked. He tried to force a side exit, but it was already sealed. He screamed not for help, but for control, for the world to bend the way it always had. Marcus stood still. He didn't light the fire, but he knew it was coming. Months earlier, Marcus had anonymously sent documents to an investigative journal. Emails, audio recordings, evidence Kane thought he'd destroyed. The journalists had been close, too close. Kane panicked. He began cleaning up loose ends, including Marcus. What Kane didn't know was that Marcus had forwarded everything. Twice, once to the journalists, and once to a federal task force, investigating corporate arson and insurance fraud. The warehouse wasn't empty. It was a crime scene waiting to happen. When firefighters dragged Kane's body from the wreckage, the city mourned. Headlines painted him as a victim of tragic accident. Marcus was arrested quietly, almost apologetically. After all, someone had to answer the question everyone was afraid to ask. Why didn't he run? In interrogation, Marcus said nothing at first. He watched the detectives, men who had once smiled at Kane's fundraisers, men who had ignored Marcus's complaints years ago. Finally, one detective leaned forward. "You could have escaped," he said. Door was 10 feet away. Marcus met his eyes. "So was the truth," he replied. That night, everything shifted. The journalist's story dropped at midnight. A federal indictment followed by mourning. Kane Industries was raided. Accounts frozen. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves. The city woke up to a different reality, one where the hero they'd trusted was the villain they'd protected. Charges against Marcus were reduced, then questioned, then quietly put on hold. Public opinion turned slowly, then all at once. Marcus was released, pending further investigation. Reporters waited outside the precinct. shouting questions he didn't answer. He walked past them with the same calm he'd worn in the interrogation room. Still, one question followed him everywhere. Why didn't he run? Because Marcus had learned something Kane never did. Running looks like guilt. Waiting looks like truth. Justice didn't come with handcuffs or applause. It came in silence, in sealed indictments, in the collapse of an empire that had stood on fear and lies. Weeks later, Marcus sat alone again, this time in his apartment. A manila envelope lay on the table. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, the warehouse. Taken from across the street, time-stamped. Early evening, earlier than the fire. On the back, 3 words were written in black ink. We saw everything. Marcus stared at the photo, heart steady, mind racing. Kane had been powerful, but powerful men never fall alone. They leave shadows behind. He folded the photo carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and looked toward the cracked window. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the city. Marcus didn't run. Not yet. Marcus learned quickly that freedom didn't mean safety. The city changed its tone the moment Victor Kane's name stopped protecting people. Phones went silent. Old allies disappeared. News vans moved on to the next scandal, but Marcus could feel it, the tension, humming beneath the streets like a live wire. Someone had left that photograph on his table, and someone wanted him to know the story wasn't finished. He replayed the timeline again and again. The early times, the angle of the shot, the person who took it had been waiting, just like he had. That meant Kane wasn't the only one who knew the warehouse would burn. Kane had been a kingpin, but kings never rule alone. They rule through systems, through loyal men who survive by staying invisible. The next morning, Marcus noticed the first sign he was being watched. A black sedan parked across the street, engine off, windows dark. It didn't follow him when he left. Didn't need to. The message was clear enough. We're still here. He went somewhere he hadn't been in years, the public records office, downtown. The same place Kane's lawyers had once buried him in paperwork. Marcus requested files tied to Kane Industries subsidiaries, entities that had quietly dissolved the week after the fire. Most clerks barely looked up, but one woman paused when she read the names. Her hand trembled just slightly as she stamped the request. You should be careful, she said, not meeting his eyes. I have been, Marcus replied. By nightfall, the journalist who had broken the story called him from an unlisted number. Her voice was tight, controlled. They're pushing back, she said. Hard. My editor's nervous. Sources are disappearing. Marcus didn't ask who they were. He already knew. Did Kane have partners? He asked. There was a long pause. He had insurance, she said finally. People who benefited from the way things were. That night, the city went quiet in a way Marcus had never heard before. No sirens, no traffic. Just the sound of his own breathing and the faint hum of electricity through the walls. He slept on the floor with the lights off, fully dressed, the photograph tucked into his jacket pocket like a warning. The knock came at 3:12 a.m. Not loud, not urgent, confident. Marcus didn't move. He counted his breaths. The knock came again, followed by a voice calm enough to be terrifying. Marcus Hale, we just want to talk. He stayed silent. Eventually, the footsteps retreated. The sedan was gone by morning, but something else had been left behind. An envelope slid under his door. Inside was a copy of a sealed court document Marcus recognized instantly. A motion to reopen an old case. His case. They were reminding him how easily the system could be turned back on him. Marcus made a decision then. Waiting had worked once, but waiting alone wouldn't work again. Power didn't shout, but it did listen when enough people spoke at the same time. He reached out to the federal task force directly, bypassing intermediaries, offering something he hadn't given anyone. Yet, I know where the rest of the bodies are buried, he said. Not literal ones, financial ones. Within days, indictments expanded. Names leaked quietly to the press. Board members resigned. A sitting councilman announced an unexpected leave of absence. The city began to understand the scale of what Kane had built and how many people had helped him build it. Publicly, Marcus became a symbol. Privately, he became a target. His accounts were frozen. His rideshare profile was deactivated. Pressure points, all carefully chosen. A warning wrapped in bureaucracy. Then came the hearing. Not for Kane, for Marcus. A prosecutor stood before the judge, arguing negligence, complicity, moral responsibility. The room was packed with spectators who couldn't decide whether Marcus was a hero or a villain who had gotten lucky. Marcus listened without reaction, the same calm mask he'd worn since the night of the fire. When it was his turn to speak, he stood slowly. "I didn't run because I knew running would protect the wrong people," he said. "I waited because someone had to." The judge recessed. The room buzzed. Outside, cameras flashed. Inside, Marcus felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not fear, not relief, resolve. The ruling came down an hour later. Case dismissed. Insufficient evidence. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Justice, at least on paper, had chosen a side. That night, Marcus received another message. No envelope this time, just a text from an unknown number. A single sentence. "You think this is over?" He deleted it without replying. He'd learned the language of power too well to mistake threats for endings. Weeks passed. The city adapted to a new narrative. Kane's name became shorthand for corruption. Marcus faded from headlines, which was exactly how he wanted it. He took a job consulting quietly for regulators, tracing money trails no one else wanted to follow. Watching, always watching. Then, one evening, as he left his office, he noticed a familiar black sedan idling across the street. This time, the window rolled down. Inside was a man Marcus didn't recognize, smiling like an old friend. "You were right," the man said. "Waiting changes things." Marcus stopped walking. "Who are you?" The man's smile widened. "Someone who wants to make sure the next fire doesn't miss." The sedan pulled away, leaving Marcus standing alone under a flickering streetlight, the weight of unfinished justice settling heavily around him. He understood then why Kane had screamed the way he did in the flames. Not because he was dying, but because he was losing control. Marcus looked up at the darkened skyline, knowing the system had cracks now, but it wasn't broken. Not yet. He didn't run, because this time, he knew exactly who was coming next.